I received the worst gift of my life, my daughter-in-law's $400,000 mortgage. I never thought the sweetest words could hide the most bitter poison. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening my soul. My name is Carolyn Hope Miller. I'm 68 years old, and I live in a historic neighborhood in San Antonio, where the old bungalows still have their wide front porches and the aroma of strong coffee mixes with the sound of the bells from St. Joseph's downtown. My hands, wrinkled from nearly 70 years of washing, ironing, and caressing, trembled that March morning as I held a ceramic mug that had belonged to my mother. The sun filtered through my kitchen windows, illuminating the yellowed photographs that covered the walls like silent witnesses to a life dedicated to others. There was my late husband, Robert, with his wide smile and eyes full of fulfilled promises. There was my son, Ethan, when he was 5, hugging me with a purity I thought was eternal. And there was the photo from his wedding to Jessica, 8 years ago, where I was smiling with the innocence of someone who still believed in good intentions. That morning, as I prepared a breakfast no one would come to share with me, I heard the roar of Ethan's BMW parking in front of my house. My heart leaped with joy. How many months had it been since his last visit? 4? 6. The days blur together when you live in the kind of solitude only abandoned mothers know. I ran to open the door, wiping my hands on the apron I'd embroidered myself with little colorful flowers. Ethan got out of the car dressed in a gray suit that cost more than my Social Security check for 3 months. His hair, perfectly slicked back, shone with expensive gel, and his Italian shoes crunched against the uneven pavement of my street. "Mom," he greeted me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, those eyes that used to look at me as if I were the moon and the stars combined. Behind him came Jessica, my daughter-in-law. Tall, thin, with that air of superiority she had cultivated since the first day she set foot in this house. She wore a pristine white dress and carried a designer handbag I'd seen in the magazines I flipped through in the doctor's waiting room. Her stiletto heels sank slightly into the soft earth of the garden I tended with so much love, but she didn't bother to wipe them before coming inside. "Mrs. Miller," she said in that syrupy voice she used when she needed something. "So good to see you. You look wonderful." A lie. I knew I looked tired, older, with more gray hair and deeper wrinkles since the last time they saw me. But I smiled, because that's what the women of my generation were taught to do, smile, even if you're dying inside. I invited them into the dining room, where the solid wood table Robert had made with his own hands waited, covered with the crocheted tablecloth my mother had given me for my wedding. I served coffee in the good china, the set I only used on special occasions, because a visit from my son and daughter-in-law had become so rare that each encounter felt like a celebration. "Mom," Ethan began, shifting uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding my gaze. "We came to talk to you about something important." My heart raced. Were they finally going to give me the news I had longed for? A grandchild? A move closer to me? Or maybe, just maybe, an apology for all those months of silence? Jessica took the lead, placing her perfectly manicured hand on the table. "Mrs. Miller, we've been thinking about you," she said with that smile I now recognized as a snake's before it strikes. "Ethan and I want to give you a gift." "A gift?" I asked, my voice breaking with emotion. It had been so long since anyone had given me a gift, since anyone had thought of me. "Yes," Jessica continued, exchanging a look with Ethan that I couldn't interpret at the time. "We just bought a beautiful house in the Dominion, in a very exclusive area. It's our dream home, Mom," Ethan added, calling me Mom with a tenderness that melted my heart. "But the bank," Jessica went on, "needs someone with a better credit history to put the mortgage in their name. It's just a formality, you understand? A tiny little favor that would change our lives." The words floated in the air of my kitchen like smoke, and I breathed them in without understanding the poison they contained. My son, my only son, needed me. After months of silence, after forgotten birthdays and unreturned calls, he finally needed me. "In my name?" I stammered, feeling my world tilt on its axis. "But I don't understand these things, kids. I'm an old woman, I'm not sophisticated." "That's exactly why, Mom," Ethan interrupted, taking my wrinkled hands in his, which were soft from office work. "You have an impeccable credit history. You've never had any debt, you've always paid everything on time. The bank trusts people like you. Besides," Jessica added in a silky voice, "you won't pay a thing. It's just so the bank approves the loan. We'll take care of everything. It's like, how can I explain it? Like just lending us your signature, that's all." I looked at both of them, feeling something in my chest slowly crumbling. Why did this sound so strange? Why was my gut screaming that something was wrong? But then I looked at Ethan, at my son, at the baby I had held in my arms during feverish nights, the boy I had comforted after nightmares, the young man I had raised alone after Robert died in that trucking accident 15 years ago. I just don't know, kids, I murmured, feeling the weight of loneliness crushing me. What if something goes wrong? Jessica's face changed subtly, like a mask slipping. Go wrong? What could possibly go wrong, Mrs. Miller? Don't you trust your own son? Ethan squeezed my hands tighter, and for a moment, I felt like I was important to someone again. Mom, we just need your help. After everything you've done for me, I'm just asking for this one favor. The last favor. The last favor. Those words stabbed me in the chest like knives. Ethan pulled a folder full of papers from the briefcase he had brought. Numbers I didn't understand, fine print my tired eyes couldn't read without my glasses. It says here the house is worth $400,000, Ethan explained, pointing to a figure that seemed astronomical to someone living on a $1,200 a month Social Security check. But it's an investment, Mom. In a few years, it'll be worth much more. $400,000. The amount was so large my mind couldn't fully process it. It was more money than I had seen in my entire life. We just need your signature here, here, and here, Jessica said, pointing to the lines with a rehearsed elegance. And that's it. We'll handle everything else. My hands trembled as I took the pen Ethan held out to me. It was an expensive pen, gold, and heavy. Not like the cheap ballpoints I used for my grocery list. Are you sure I won't have to pay anything? I asked one last time, feeling my world torn between the mother who wanted to help and the woman who sensed danger. Absolutely nothing, Mom. I promise, Ethan said, kissing my forehead like he did when he was a boy promising to behave. And dear God, I believed him. I signed. I signed because he was my son. I signed because I was lonely. I signed because I wanted to be important to someone again. I signed my own death sentence. After Ethan and Jessica left that afternoon, I sat in my kitchen until the sun set behind the roofs of the neighboring houses. The signature was still fresh on the papers they had left on my table, along with a copy that, according to Jessica, was for my files. As if I had files. As if I understood any of what I had just done. I couldn't sleep that night. I tossed and turned in sheets that smelled of cheap fabric softener, thinking about the look on Ethan's face when he had thanked me. There was something strange in his eyes, something I couldn't decipher. Was it guilt? Relief? Or was it that coldness I had started to notice ever since he married Jessica? 3 weeks later, the first envelope from the bank arrived. It was thick, official, with my name printed in capital letters, MRS. Carolyn Hope Miller. I opened it with trembling hands while I had my morning coffee. Inside were documents full of numbers and terms I didn't comprehend: amortization, variable interest rate, mandatory life insurance. But there was something I did understand: a monthly amount that had to be paid. $2,800. Every month. My entire Social Security check wasn't even enough for a fifth of that amount. I called Ethan immediately. The phone rang and rang until it went to voicemail. Hi, this is Ethan Miller, sales executive at Prestige Motors of San Antonio. I can't take your call right now, but please leave a message after the tone. I hung up without leaving a message. Since when did my son not answer my calls? I called again an hour later. And an hour after that. And after lunch. Nothing. The next day, I took the bus from my neighborhood to the gated community where Ethan worked. The trip cost me $5 I didn't have, but I needed to see him, to have him explain what those papers meant. The car dealership was impressive: enormous glass windows, shiny cars that cost more than my house, and young, beautiful receptionists who looked at me as if I were a stain in their perfect world. Ethan Miller? I asked a girl who couldn't have been more than 25 and was wearing more makeup than I had in my entire life. Do you have an appointment? She replied without looking up from her phone. I'm his mother. That got her attention. She looked me up and down, evaluating my 1,000 times washed polyester dress, my comfortable but worn shoes, my woven plastic bag I'd bought at the flea market. One moment, she said, picking up the internal phone. Ethan, your mother is here. There was a long pause. Too long. He says he's in a meeting, the receptionist lied with a plastic smile. He said it's better if you call to make an appointment. But I had seen him. Through the glass walls of his office, Ethan was sitting at his desk, talking on the phone and laughing. When our eyes met for a split second, he quickly looked away. My son had seen me and had chosen not to see me. I went home with a broken heart and $5 poorer. That night I called Jessica, but her phone also went straight to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Jessica Miller, image and style consultant. Leave a message and I'll get back to you soon. Jessica Miller. She didn't use her maiden name anymore. She was a full-fledged Miller, while I, who had given my life for that name, seemed to be getting erased from it. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into a whole month of silence. More letters from the bank arrived, each more threatening than the last. First notice of past due payment. Second notice. Delinquency warning. I tried to go to the bank to explain that there was a mistake, that I hadn't requested any loan, that my income couldn't possibly cover that amount. The bank officer, a young man in a blue suit and a perfect tie, looked at me with that mix of pity and disdain they reserve for old people who don't understand the modern world. "Mrs. Miller, your signature is right here," he said, showing me the documents. "You committed to paying this mortgage. If you cannot meet the payments, we will have to proceed with foreclosing on the collateral." "What collateral?" I asked with a trembling voice. "Your house, ma'am. You put your house up as collateral for the loan." The world stopped. My house. The house Robert had built brick by brick, working double shifts at the textile mill. The house where I had raised Ethan, where I had mourned my husband's death, where I kept all my memories. But I didn't know. I started to say. "It's right here, in clause number 15. Your signature authorizes the use of the property located at 247 Maple Avenue as mortgage collateral." I walked out of the bank feeling the ground move beneath my feet. People passed by me on the street, normal, living their lives, while mine was crumbling in slow motion. That afternoon, I decided to do something I hadn't done since Ethan was a teenager: show up at his house unannounced. I took 2 buses to get to the Dominion, the gated community where they lived. The houses were enormous, with perfect lawns and brand new cars parked in the driveways. Ethan's house was 2 stories, with a stone facade and a fountain in the garden that must have cost more than all my furniture combined. I rang the doorbell. A housekeeper opened the door, a young Hispanic woman who reminded me of my grandmother. "Is Mrs. Miller home?" I asked. "No, ma'am, she won't be back until tonight," she answered in a low voice, looking back inside as if afraid someone would hear her. "And Mr. Miller? He's not here either. Would you like to leave a message?" Before I could answer, I heard Jessica's voice from inside the house. "Maria, who is it?" The housekeeper looked at me with panic in her eyes. It's a lady looking for Mr. Miller," she lied. "Tell her Ethan isn't here and we don't know when he'll be back." My heart shattered. Jessica knew it was me. My own daughter-in-law was turning me away as if I were a bothersome stranger. "Can you please tell her that Mrs. Miller came by?" I whispered to the housekeeper. "Yes, ma'am," she replied, sadness in her eyes. "I'll tell her." I walked back to the bus stop with my legs shaking. On the way, I passed a coffee shop where, through the large window, I saw something that completely destroyed me. Ethan and Jessica were in there, drinking coffee and laughing, sharing a piece of cake like a happy couple. I stood on the sidewalk, watching them through the glass. Ethan was wearing a new shirt I hadn't seen before. Jessica's hair was freshly styled. They looked prosperous, happy, without a care in the world. Jessica said something that made Ethan laugh heartily. Then, as if she sensed my presence, she turned toward the window. Our eyes met for an eternal second. Her smile vanished, but she didn't flinch. She simply turned back to Ethan and kept talking. He never looked my way. I went home crying on the bus, while the other passengers pretended not to notice the old woman sobbing quietly in the back seat. That night, alone in my kitchen, with a cup of cold tea in my hands and the bank bills scattered across the table, I understood something terrible. My own children had used me. They had lied to me, they had deceived me, and now they were abandoning me to my fate. But the most painful thing wasn't the money, or even the possibility of losing my house. The most painful thing was realizing that to Ethan, I was no longer his mother. I was just a name on a piece of paper. A useful signature. A problem solved. And now that they didn't need me anymore, they had simply decided I didn't exist. The following months turned into a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Every day I woke up hoping it was a bad dream, that Ethan would appear at my door with an explanation, an apology, a promise that everything would be resolved. But the days passed and the silence grew deeper, crueler, more final. The letters from the bank now came every week. Some in white envelopes, others in yellow ones that seemed to scream urgent from the mailbox. I stopped opening them after the 10th one. I couldn't bear to read those impossible numbers one more time, those threats written in legalese that turned my despair into mere administrative procedures. My neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, a 70-year-old woman who lived alone like me, started asking if I was okay. She had noticed I was thinner, quieter, with dark circles under my eyes that even the cheap makeup I bought at the drugstore couldn't hide. "Carolyn, honey, is everything all right? I don't see you hanging laundry as early as you used to." "Yes, Eleanor, I'm just a little tired." I'd lie, because how do you explain to someone that your own son has destroyed your life? The truth was, I couldn't afford my usual laundry detergent anymore. The $100 I used to save each month for small expenses now had to cover everything: electricity, water, gas, food. I had started washing clothes with bar soap I bought in bulk, the same kind my mother used when I was a child, and we didn't have money even for dreams. My diet was reduced to the basics: beans, rice, bread, and if I was lucky, an egg or a small piece of cheese. Fridays, which used to be my day to go to the farmer's market and buy myself a little treat, some barbecue, an out-of-season fruit, a slice of cake, became inventory days, counting coins, calculating if I had enough for the gas bill or if I'd have to cook on the old charcoal grill in the backyard like my grandmother used to. I lost so much weight that my clothes hung loosely on me. The blue dress I wore to church on Sundays now looked like a sack. My hands, always hardworking, began to tremble not just from nerves, but from weakness. One November afternoon, while I was sweeping the dry leaves in the small yard where Robert had planted a lemon tree that had been bearing fruit for 15 years, I heard familiar voices on the street. I peeked through the wooden gate and saw them, Ethan and Jessica, walking down my street, but they weren't coming to my house. They were headed to Mrs. Henderson's. My heart jumped with joy. They had come looking for me. Surely they had asked the neighbor for me. I rushed to fix myself up a bit, to comb my hair that had been falling out more than usual lately, to put a little color on my lips with the lipstick I'd been using for years. I went out to the porch and waited for them. But minutes later, I saw them leave Mrs. Henderson's house and walk toward their car without even a glance at my home. "Ethan!" I shouted from my gate. "Son!" He stopped. For a moment, I thought he would run to me, hug me, tell me it was all a terrible misunderstanding. But he just looked at me for a few seconds, said something to Jessica I couldn't hear, and they continued toward their car. I ran into the street in my old slippers, not caring if the neighbors saw me. "Ethan, please, I need to talk to you," I pleaded as he opened the car door. Jessica got in without even looking at me, as if I were invisible. "Mom, it's not a good time," Ethan said in a cold voice, the same one he used with difficult clients at the dealership. "We're busy." "Son, it's about the bank papers. I don't understand what's happening. I need you to explain." "We already talked about that," he interrupted, getting into the car. "It was just a formality, Mom. Don't overreact. But they're asking for $2,800 every month. Ethan, that's my entire Social Security check and more." The BMW's engine roared to life. Ethan rolled down the window just a few inches. "Mom, don't make a scene in the street. We'll talk later." And they drove off, leaving me standing in the middle of the street, with neighbors peeking from their windows, with Mrs. Henderson watching me from her doorway with a look of pity. That night, I found out why they had gone to Mrs. Henderson's house. My neighbor knocked on my door with a pot of chicken soup. "Here, honey. You look too thin," she said with motherly affection. As we had the soup in my kitchen, Mrs. Henderson told me the truth. "Carolyn, your daughter-in-law came to ask me if I knew any cheap lawyers," she said in a soft voice. "She said they were having legal trouble with a house they bought. That someone had scammed them with the paperwork." My blood ran cold. They had legal trouble. They. As if I didn't exist, as if my signature on those documents was just a minor detail in their perfect lives. "Did she say anything else?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Yes, honey. She said they needed to get rid of a problem with a mortgage that was in someone else's name. That it was the bank's mistake and they had to fix it quickly." A bank's mistake. I was a bank's mistake. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in the kitchen until dawn, looking at the photos of Ethan I had on the refrigerator. Baby Ethan in my arms. Ethan on his first day of school, in his pristine uniform that I had ironed with so much love. Ethan on his high school graduation day, hugging me and telling me I was the best mom in the world. When had he become this stranger who denied me in the street? The problems began to pile up like storm clouds. The power was cut twice because I couldn't pay on time. The gas ran out and I had no money for a new tank, so I started cooking on the charcoal grill in the backyard, like my mother used to do on the farm where I grew up. But the worst part wasn't the discomfort. It was the humiliation. The utility company employees treated me like an irresponsible deadbeat. The man at the corner store where I'd been shopping for 20 years started asking me to pay for everything in cash, because he couldn't extend credit to people who didn't pay their debts anymore. How had he found out about my financial problems? Who had spread the gossip that Carolyn Miller wasn't paying her bills anymore? The answer came one afternoon when I went to the market to buy tomatoes. I overheard two women talking at the vegetable stand. "Did you hear about Mrs. Miller, from Maple Avenue? The mother of the guy who sells cars? That's the one. They say she got into some shady business and now owes the bank millions." "Oh, no. But she was always such a proper lady." "Well, there you go. Now they say even her son is suing her because she got him into trouble." Ethan was suing me? My own son? I got home shaking. Not from the cold, but from a mixture of fear, betrayal, and a sadness so deep it hurt to breathe. That afternoon, the phone rang. It was the first call I'd received in weeks. "Mrs. Carolyn Miller," a professional male voice asked. "Yes, this is she. I'm calling from the law firm of Hernandez and Associates. We represent Mr. Ethan Miller in a lawsuit he is filing against you for the unauthorized use of his name on financial documents." The world stopped. My son was suing me. "What?" I whispered. "Ma'am, we need you to come to our offices to be officially served with the lawsuit. Mr. Miller alleges that you signed financial documents using his name without authorization and that this has caused him financial damages. I hung up the phone and fell to my knees on the kitchen floor. Ethan hadn't just abandoned me. Now he was blaming me for everything. He was flipping the story, turning me into the villain of his own betrayal. My own son, the baby I had held in my arms, the boy I had comforted through nightmares, the young man I had raised with all my love, now saw me as his enemy. And the most terrible thing of all was a question I didn't dare answer: what had I done to deserve this? The legal summons arrived 3 days later, delivered by a young man on a motorcycle who asked for my ID before handing me the thick, official envelope. My hands trembled so much as I signed for it that I could barely write my full name on the paper. The document was filled with legal terms I didn't understand: patrimonial fraud, identity theft, damages. But there was one sentence I understood perfectly, written in black letters that seemed to burn my eyes. The plaintiff, Ethan Robert Miller, requests that the competent authority determine the criminal and civil liability of Mrs. Carolyn Hope Miller for. Ethan had used my full name. My full name, as if I were a stranger. As if I hadn't been the one to register him at the courthouse, who had chosen each of those letters thinking of the bright future my baby would have. I couldn't eat that night. The soup Mrs. Henderson had brought me sat untouched on the kitchen table, growing cold like my heart. I sat in the rocking chair Robert had made for me when I was pregnant with Ethan and rocked slowly, looking at the photos of my son that covered the walls. When had I lost my little boy? When exactly had Ethan decided I was disposable? I remembered the last time he had said, "I love you, Mom." It was 2 years ago, on Mother's Day. Jessica had organized a lunch at an expensive restaurant where the waiters treated me like I didn't belong. Ethan had given me a bouquet of flowers and a card that said, "For the best mom in the world." Now I wondered if Jessica had written those words, if even that last show of affection had been a lie. The next morning, I went to look for legal help. Downtown, there were lawyers' offices that served people like me, people with no money but big problems. I climbed 3 flights of stairs that smelled of dampness and cheap disinfectant to reach the office of a Mr. Raul Vasquez. He was a man in his 50s, with a prominent belly and glasses that kept sliding down his nose. His office was small, with books stacked on the floor and a fan that made more noise than breeze. "Mrs. Miller," he said after reviewing the documents for 20 minutes that felt like an eternity. "Your situation is complex." "Complex how, sir?" "Well, you signed these documents voluntarily. Your son claims you used his name to get the loan without his authorization, but according to the bank, you are legally responsible for the debt." "But he asked me to sign. They told me it was just a formality." "Do you have any proof of that? Recordings, text messages, witnesses?" I thought about that afternoon in my kitchen, how I had blindly trusted the words of Ethan and Jessica. What mother records her son when he asks for a favor? "No, sir. I just believed my son." The lawyer took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Ma'am, legally, you are in a very difficult position. Your name is on all the documents, your signature authorizes the mortgage collateral, and now your son is suing you, alleging that you committed fraud. And what can happen? Worst case scenario, you could face criminal charges. Best case, you'll have to pay the entire debt or lose your house." I left that office feeling more lost than when I had arrived. Walking through the downtown streets reminded me of when I used to come with Ethan as a child, holding hands, looking at the store windows and buying him a small toy with the money I saved from my work as a seamstress. Ethan had been a sweet, affectionate, intelligent boy. What had happened to that boy? What had I done wrong for him to become this man capable of destroying his own mother? When I got home, there was a truck from the bank parked in front of my door. 2 men in suits were examining the facade of my house, taking pictures and writing things in a notebook. "Mrs. Miller," one of them asked, a tall, thin guy who reminded me of a vulture. "Yes. We're from the Collateral Recovery Department. We're here to do a preliminary assessment of the property." "An assessment for what?" "For the foreclosure, ma'am. Your account is 3 months delinquent. You have 30 days to bring it current, or we will proceed with recovering the property." 30 days. 1 month to get $8,400 that I didn't have, had never had, and would never have. That night, I called Ethan one last time. I dialed his number with trembling fingers, hoping, praying he would answer, that he would give me a chance to explain, to plead, to remind him that I was his mother. "Hello," he answered in an irritated voice. "Ethan, it's Mom." There was a long silence. Then I heard Jessica's voice in the background, hang up on her. "Ethan, please, I need to talk to you. The people from the bank came to my house. They're going to take it. Please, son." "Mom, I've already spoken with my lawyer. He told me I can't have any contact with you until the lawsuit is resolved." "The lawsuit? Are you really going to sue me? Your own mother?" "Mom, you got me into trouble. You used my name without permission. Now I have problems at work, Jessica is very stressed, and it's all your fault. My fault? Ethan, you asked me to sign. That's not true. You deceived us, too. The line went dead. Ethan had hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand for hours, hoping it would ring, that Ethan would call back to apologize, to tell me it had all been a misunderstanding, that Jessica had him confused, that deep down he was still my little boy. But the phone never rang. A week later, Mrs. Henderson came to see me with news that finally shattered my heart. Carolyn, honey, I have to tell you something, she said as we had chamomile tea in my kitchen. I saw your Ethan downtown yesterday. You did? How was he? He was with a young girl, Carolyn. It wasn't Jessica. My world tilted once again. Are you sure, Eleanor? Very sure, honey. A young thing, couldn't be more than 25. Very dressed up, expensive clothes. He had his arm around her and they looked very affectionate. Ethan hadn't just betrayed me. He was also betraying Jessica. But the cruelest part was realizing that I wasn't even surprised anymore. My son had become a man capable of anything. That night, alone in my house that would soon no longer be mine, I understood something terrible. I had raised a monster. I had loved, protected, and sacrificed everything for a man who had no heart. And the most painful part was a question that tormented me every night. Was there something of me in that cruelty? Had I failed so profoundly as a mother that I had created someone capable of destroying the person who loved him most? I sat on my kitchen floor, surrounded by the photos of Ethan I had been collecting for 38 years, and I cried like I hadn't cried since Robert's death. I cried for the son I had lost without knowing when. I cried for the woman I had been and who no longer existed. I cried for the years I had wasted believing in a love that was never real. But most of all, I cried because I realized I had nothing left to lose. And sometimes, when you have nothing left to lose, that's when you can finally start to fight. It was my granddaughter, Sophia, who changed everything, though she didn't even know it. Sophia was 16 and was the daughter of my younger son, Javier, who had been living in San Diego for 10 years. Javier and I had lost touch after he moved out west looking for better opportunities, but he knew nothing of what was happening with Ethan. To him, his older brother was still the successful car salesman he appeared to be. Sophia arrived in San Antonio on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced, with a pink backpack covered in band patches and a smile that painfully reminded me of Ethan at her age. She had taken a bus from San Diego because she wanted to see the city where her dad was born and, as she told me, because she had saved money from her part-time job to make the trip alone. Grandma Carolyn, she said when I opened the door and saw her standing there, in her fashionably ripped jeans and fluorescent sneakers, I came to meet you. Dad talks about you all the time, but we've never been able to visit. In that moment, I realized I hadn't genuinely smiled in weeks. The smile I gave Sophia came from a very deep place inside me, a place I thought Ethan had killed forever. My beautiful girl, I said, hugging her with a strength that surprised me. How did you get so big? The last time I saw you, you were just a baby. Sophia stayed with me for a week. During those 7 days, my house came back to life. She cooked with me, showed me songs on her phone, helped me hang the laundry, and told me stories about high school, her friends, and the boys she liked. But most importantly, Sophia listened to me. She really listened. On the 4th day of her visit, as we drank hibiscus iced tea on the porch and watched the evening fall, I told her everything. I told her about the papers I had signed, about how Ethan had abandoned me, about the lawsuit, about the impending foreclosure. Sophia listened in silence, without interrupting, with that seriousness young people sometimes have when they understand the adult world is crueler than they imagined. Grandma, she said when I finished my story, what Uncle Ethan did to you is really messed up. He's my son, Sophia. I must have done something wrong for. No, Grandma, she interrupted with a firm voice. You didn't do anything wrong. My dad always tells me how you raised them by yourself after Grandpa died, how you worked day and night so they wouldn't lack for anything. Uncle Ethan is acting like a... She paused, searching for the right words, like someone who forgot where he came from. It was the first time in months someone had told me it wasn't my fault. But what can I do, sweetie? I'm an old woman with no money, no education, no expensive lawyers. Sophia became thoughtful, playing with her phone. Grandma, do you have Facebook? No, honey. I don't understand that computer stuff. Can I show you? I think we could do something. That night, Sophia taught me how to use Facebook on the old smartphone I had stored in a drawer, a gift Ethan had given me years ago that I had never fully learned to use. With infinite patience, my granddaughter showed me how to create an account, how to upload photos, how to write posts. Grandma, look, she said, browsing Ethan's profile. Uncle Ethan posts pictures every day. Look at his new house, his vacations, his cars. It's all here. We looked at photos of Ethan and Jessica in expensive restaurants, on beach trips, in the house I had unknowingly helped pay for. In one of the most recent photos, Ethan was toasting with champagne in what looked like a celebration. The caption read, "Celebrating the resolution of some legal issues. Everything turned out perfectly." Legal issues. He meant me. I was a legal issue he had resolved. "Grandma," Sophia said in a soft but determined voice, "what if we tell your story here? What if people knew the truth?" "I don't know, honey. Who would believe me? Who would care about the story of an old woman like me?" "More people than you think, Grandma. A lot of people have gone through similar things." That night, we wrote my first Facebook post. Sophia helped with the words, but the pain and the truth were all mine. "My name is Carolyn Miller. I'm 68 years old and I want to tell you what's happening to me. My son asked me to sign some papers to help him with a house. He told me it was just a formality, that I wouldn't have to pay anything. Now they're taking my house, he's suing me, and he says I deceived him. I don't have money for lawyers and I don't know what to do. I just want someone to know the truth before I end up on the street." Sophia also uploaded a few photos, one of the two of us in the kitchen, one of my humble but clean house, and an old photo of Ethan as a boy, hugging me on his elementary school graduation day. "Now we wait," Sophia said. The next day, there were 3 comments. The second day, 20. By the third day, the post had been shared 200 times and had over 500 comments. People wrote things that made me cry, but this time from emotion. "Mrs. Miller, you are not alone. My brother did something similar to me. Ma'am, there are lawyers who help people like you for free. My mother went through the same thing. Don't give up. Carolyn, you deserve respect. Your son is a disgrace." A woman named Letitia sent me a private message. "Mrs. Miller, I'm a journalist with Channel 4 News. Could we talk? Your story deserves to be told." Sophia screamed with excitement when she saw the message. "Grandma, a TV station wants to interview you." I was scared. What would Ethan think? What if it made things worse? "Honey, what if this makes Ethan even angrier?" "Grandma," Sophia said, taking my wrinkled hands in her young, soft ones, "can he get any angrier than he already is? Can he treat you any worse than he already does?" She was right. I had already lost my son. He had already sued me. They were already going to take my house. What more could I lose? But more importantly, for the first time in months, I no longer felt alone. The television interview was scheduled for Friday. Letitia, the journalist, came to my house with a young cameraman who treated me with respect and kindness. Not like the lawyers or the bank employees, who saw me as a case number. "Mrs. Miller," Letitia said as they set up the cameras, "just tell your story in your own words. People need to hear truths like yours." During the interview, I cried, but they were different tears. They weren't tears of defeat, but of release. For the first time in months, I was speaking, being heard, existing for someone other than myself. I told everything. The afternoon I signed the papers, the lies from Ethan and Jessica, the abandonment, the lawsuit, the months of hunger and humiliation. What would you say to other parents who might be going through something similar? Letitia asked at the end. "That we are not disposable," I answered in a voice I didn't recognize as my own, stronger, more confident. "That raising a child doesn't make us their slaves for life. That we deserve respect, even if we're old, even if we don't have money, even if we don't understand papers and banks." When the interview was over, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: dignity. That evening, Sophia had to return to San Diego. At the bus station, as I hugged her before she got on, she said something that changed my life forever. "Grandma, you're not the same woman I met a week ago. You seem stronger." And it was true. I felt different. As if I had been asleep and was finally waking up. "Thank you, sweetie. You saved my life." "No, Grandma. You saved yourself. I just taught you how to use Facebook," she said with a mischievous smile. When the bus left, I stood at the station, watching its taillights disappear into the distance. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel alone. I had a story to tell. I had a voice I had found again. And I had a battle that, just maybe, I could win. The interview aired on Monday night on the main newscast. I watched it alone in my living room, my hands trembling as I listened to myself tell my story on television. It was strange to see myself there, on that small screen, being treated as someone important, as someone whose words mattered. The next day, my phone didn't stop ringing. Calls from strangers offering words of support, from lawyers offering to help me pro bono, from organizations that defended the rights of senior citizens. But the call that impacted me the most was from a woman named Mercedes Garcia. "Mrs. Miller, this is Mercedes. I saw your interview last night and I want to meet you," she said in a firm but warm voice. "I'm a lawyer specializing in family fraud and I think I can help you." Mercedes came to see me that same afternoon. She was a woman in her 40s, with short hair, an elegant but not flashy suit, and eyes that inspired trust from the first moment. "Mrs. Miller, she said as she reviewed all the documents I showed her, what they did to you is not just morally reprehensible, it's completely illegal. And we're going to prove it. But ma'am, I signed those papers. Yes, but you signed under false pretenses. That's called fraudulent inducement, and it completely nullifies any contract. Furthermore, your son is committing several crimes: fraud, elder abuse, and identity theft. For the first time in months, I felt real hope. Mercedes worked quickly. In 3 days, she had filed a countersuit against Ethan, a criminal complaint for fraud, and had managed to get a judge to temporarily halt the foreclosure on my house. Now comes the hard part, she told me. Your son is going to try to defend himself. He'll probably try to make an out-of-court settlement to avoid this going to trial. She was right. On Thursday morning, as I was watering the plants on the porch, I heard the sound of Ethan's BMW parking in front of my house. My heart sped up, but this time not with joy, but with something I took a moment to recognize. It was no longer fear. It was determination. Ethan got out of the car alone. Jessica wasn't with him. He looked different, thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes, his suit wrinkled as if he had slept in it. His expensive shoes weren't as shiny anymore. He knocked on the door with his knuckles, softly, almost timidly. "Mom, it's me," he said in a muffled voice. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. I stood in the doorway, looking at him for the first time in months without feeling the urge to hug him. "Ethan. Mom, we need to talk." Talk. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other like when he was a boy and had done something wrong. "Mom, the TV thing, that wasn't right. Now I'm having problems at work. People are pointing at me on the street. Jessica is very upset." And? My response caught him off guard. He was expecting apologies, explanations, please. Not this new Carolyn who looked at him with coldness. "Mom, we can fix this. I can help you with the bank payments. We can reach an agreement." "An agreement? Like when you told me it was just a formality." "Mom, things got more complicated than I expected." "Ethan," I said, my voice steady, "tell me something. At any point in these past few months, did you ask yourself how I was doing? If I had food? If I could pay the electric bill? If I was lonely?" Ethan looked down. "Mom, I had my own problems." "What problems? The trips to the beach? The dinners at expensive restaurants? The mistress you have?" He turned pale. "How do you know?" "I know a lot of things, Ethan. I know you used me. I know you lied to me. I know you abandoned me when I needed you most. And I know you're here now not because you care about your mother, but because you're afraid of the consequences. Mom, please. I'm your son. My son died the day he decided to sue his own mother instead of facing his responsibilities." Ethan tried to step closer, but I took a step back. "Mom, we can fix this. Drop the lawsuit, stop all this drama, and I'll take care of the mortgage. Everything goes back to normal." "Normal? What's normal, Ethan? The months you didn't answer my calls? Pretending you didn't know me on the street? Leaving me to go hungry while you celebrated solving your legal issues?" "Mom." "No," I interrupted with a firmness that surprised even me. "There's no going back, Ethan. Not after everything you've done to me. What do you want then? Money? How much do you want?" That question was like a slap in the face. My own son thought this was all about money. "I don't want your money, Ethan. I want justice. I want you to know that I am not your disposable object. I want you to understand that mothers are not banks you can use when it's convenient and abandon when you don't need us anymore." "Mom, you don't understand. If this goes to trial, things will get very complicated. For you, Ethan. They'll get complicated for you." He was silent for a few seconds, and for a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the boy he had been. But when he spoke, I confirmed that boy was gone. "Fine," he said in a cold voice. "If you want a war, you'll get a war. But know that this is going to cost you. It's already cost me, Ethan. It cost me a son." He turned and walked to his car. Before getting in, he turned back one last time. "You're going to end up alone, Mom," he shouted from the street. I was already alone, Ethan. I just hadn't realized it yet. That night, as I ate the stew I had made with vegetables Mrs. Henderson had given me from her garden, I reflected on what had happened. Ethan had come to my house expecting to find the same woman he had deceived and abandoned. He expected tears, pleas, for me to grovel at his feet begging for forgiveness for causing him trouble. Instead, he had found a woman who had learned to value herself, who understood that love is not synonymous with abuse, who had discovered that dignity is non-negotiable, not even with your own children. 2 days later, Mercedes called with extraordinary news. "Mrs. Miller, I have important information. We've been investigating your son's finances and found something interesting." "What did you find, Ms. Garcia?" "Ethan doesn't have one mistress. He has 2. And he bought a house for one of them using another fraudulent loan. This time, he used forged documents in Jessica's name. My world tilted once more, but this time not from pain, but from astonishment at the sheer scale of Ethan's betrayal. Does Jessica know? We doubt it. In fact, we believe she is also a victim of Ethan's. We've been in contact with her through her lawyers. Jessica has lawyers? Yes, Mrs. Miller. Jessica is also suing Ethan. Apparently, he emptied their joint accounts and went to live with the other woman. Jessica was left with nothing, just like you. It was ironic. The woman who had been complicit in my destruction was now a victim of the same betrayal I had suffered. Ms. Garcia, what does all this mean? It means we have a much stronger case than we thought. Ethan isn't just a bad son, Mrs. Miller. He's a professional con artist who has used the women in his family as tools for his schemes. I couldn't sleep that night, but it wasn't from anxiety. It was from a strange mix of justice and sadness. Justice because the truth was finally coming to light. Sadness because the son I had raised was even worse than I had imagined. But I also felt something else, relief. Relief in knowing that I hadn't been a bad mother. Relief in understanding that what happened to me was not my fault. Relief in confirming that the woman I was now, the one who had stood up to Ethan at her own front door, was the woman who had always been there, just waiting for the moment to wake up. The lion that had been sleeping inside me for 68 years had finally opened its eyes. And it was hungry for justice. The trial began 3 months later, in a cold courtroom at the Behar County Courthouse that smelled of old paper and disinfectant. It was a rainy Tuesday in February, and I arrived early, accompanied by Mercedes and Mrs. Henderson, who had insisted on coming for moral support. I was wearing my best dress, the navy blue one I had bought for Ethan's wedding 8 years ago. I had done my hair carefully and put on the pearl earrings Robert had given me on our 10th anniversary. I wanted to look dignified, not like the victim I had been, but like the strong woman I had become. Ethan arrived 15 minutes later with 2 expensive lawyers, dressed in suits that cost more than my annual Social Security income. He, too, had dressed for the occasion, dark gray suit, red tie, shoes that gleamed under the fluorescent lights of the courthouse. But he looked nervous, gaunt, as if he hadn't slept well in weeks. When our eyes met for the first time since that afternoon at my door, Ethan immediately looked away. He couldn't hold the gaze of the woman he had betrayed. The judge was an older man, about 60, with small glasses and a serious expression that commanded authority. For the first hour, Ethan's lawyers presented their version, that I had used my son's name without authorization, that I had committed fraud, that the debts were my responsibility. I listened in silence as these elegant men turned my pain into legal arguments, as they described my months of suffering as the natural consequences of irresponsible actions. It was like listening to someone else's story, a distorted version where I was the villain of my own tragedy. Then it was Mercedes's turn. Your Honor, she began in a clear, firm voice, what we have here is not a case of fraud committed by Mrs. Carolyn Miller. What we have is a systematic pattern of financial elder abuse, perpetrated by her own son. Mercedes presented the evidence one piece at a time, the Facebook posts where Ethan flaunted his luxuries while I went hungry, the bank transfers showing how he had emptied accounts without my knowledge, the testimonies from neighbors who had witnessed my physical decline during the months of abandonment. But the most devastating piece of evidence was the video. Your Honor, I present as evidence a security recording from the car dealership where the plaintiff works, Mercedes announced. On the screen, Ethan appeared in his office, talking on the phone. The audio was crystal clear. Yeah, I got my mom to sign. The old woman doesn't get any of this stuff. No, she doesn't suspect a thing. I told her it was just a formality. Yep, in a few months, it won't be a problem anymore. Old houses sell fast in that neighborhood. The silence in the courtroom was deafening. Ethan had turned as white as a sheet of paper. His own lawyers looked at him in horror. As you can hear, Mercedes continued, Mr. Ethan Miller deliberately planned to deceive his mother. Not only that, but he was already planning to sell Mrs. Miller's home, leaving her on the street. The judge took notes for several minutes before speaking. Do you have any further evidence, counselor? Yes, Your Honor. We are also presenting evidence that Mr. Ethan Miller has committed similar acts of fraud against other women, including his own wife. Mercedes displayed the documents they had found about the other properties, the fraudulent loans, the emptied accounts. Ethan wasn't just a cruel son, he was a habitual criminal. When it was my turn to testify, I walked to the stand with my legs trembling but my voice steady. Mercedes had prepared me, but more than that, I had the strength that comes from speaking the truth after months of being silenced. Mrs. Miller, Mercedes asked me, did your son at any point explain that you would be responsible for the mortgage payments? No, ma'am. They told me it was just a signature, that I wouldn't pay a thing. What did you do when the bank statements started arriving? I tried desperately to reach my son. I called, I went to his job, I went to his house. But he refused to speak with me. How did you live during the months your son abandoned you? Here my voice broke a little, but I continued. I went hungry, Your Honor. I had to choose between eating and paying the electricity bill. I lost so much weight my clothes were hanging off me. And the worst part wasn't the physical hunger, but the feeling that my own son had thrown me away like trash. I looked directly at Ethan as I said these words. This time, he didn't look away. He looked at me with something I couldn't interpret: guilt? Shame? Or just the fear of someone who knows he's been caught? Ethan's lawyer tried to attack my testimony during the cross-examination, but every question he asked only served to expose the cruelty of what they had done. Mrs. Miller, isn't it true that you signed those documents voluntarily? Yes, I signed voluntarily. Because I trusted my son. Because I thought a son would never hurt his mother. Did you not read the documents before signing them? Young man, I answered with a dignity that surprised me, I am a 68-year-old woman with a high school education. I trusted my son's word because that's how I was raised, that family takes care of each other, protects each other, helps each other. I wasn't taught that a son could be a mother's worst enemy. After 3 days of testimony and evidence, the judge delivered his verdict. In the case of Carolyn Miller versus Ethan Miller, he began in a solemn voice, "This court finds that it has been proven conclusively that the defendant committed fraud, financial elder abuse, and forgery." Ethan slumped in his chair. "Therefore, I declare all financial obligations of Mrs. Carolyn Miller related to the mortgage in question to be null and void. Mr. Ethan Miller will assume full responsibility for the debt and will pay punitive and compensatory damages to his mother in the amount of $100,000. $100,000. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. Furthermore, the judge continued, I order that a copy of this case file be forwarded to the district attorney's office to investigate the potential criminal offenses committed by Mr. Ethan Miller. When we left the courthouse, Mrs. Henderson hugged me, crying with joy. Mercedes was smiling with the satisfaction of a job well done. I felt strange, as if I had just woken up from a very long nightmare. Ethan left the courthouse 10 minutes later, flanked by his lawyers who were talking rapidly amongst themselves. When he passed by me, he stopped. Mom, he said, his voice cracking, I'm sorry. I looked at him for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. Ethan, I replied with a calm I didn't know I possessed, I'm sorry, too. I'm sorry I lost my son so long ago without realizing it. 3 months later, I was sitting on the patio of my new home, a small but bright apartment in a quiet part of San Antonio, drinking coffee as I watched the sunset. With the money from the settlement, I had been able to move, buy new furniture, and I still had enough left to live with dignity for the rest of my days. But the most important thing wasn't the money. It was the peace I felt at night, the ability to look at myself in the mirror without shame, the pride of having fought for my dignity and won. Sophia visited me every month. Javier had come from San Diego to hear the whole story and to apologize for not being there when I needed him. Mom, he had said, you are the bravest woman I know. Ethan never tried to contact me again. I learned from the news that he had been arrested for the other fraudulent schemes Mercedes had uncovered. Jessica had divorced him and had also recovered some of what he had stolen from her. Some nights I thought about him, about the sweet boy he had been, about the happy moments we had shared. But I no longer cried for him. I had learned that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to destroy you. One afternoon, while organizing photos of my new life, I found a letter that had arrived that morning. It was from a woman in Houston who had seen my story on television. Mrs. Miller, the letter said, my son is doing something very similar to what was done to you. After seeing your interview, I understood that I don't have to stay silent. Thank you for showing me that mothers have a right to dignity, too. It was the 36th letter I had received from women in similar situations. Mercedes and I had decided to create a foundation to help elderly victims of family abuse. We called it Mothers with Dignity, and we already had cases in 5 states. That night, as I prepared dinner in my new kitchen, I reflected on everything that had happened. Ethan had given me the worst gift of my life, that fraudulent mortgage that nearly destroyed me. But without knowing it, he had also given me the best gift, the chance to discover who Carolyn Miller really was when no one else believed in her. He had transformed my ruin into my freedom. And for the first time in 68 years, I was living for myself. Today is my 70th birthday. I'm sitting on the balcony of my apartment, watching San Antonio wake up with the morning sun, drinking coffee from a new mug I bought yesterday simply because I liked its turquoise color. It's a small luxury, but one I celebrate every day, being able to buy something just because I like it, without having to calculate if I'll have enough left for food for the rest of the week. 2 years have passed since the trial. 2 years since I got back not only my dignity, but myself. This morning, I received a call that filled me with joy. It was Sophia, my granddaughter, calling me from the University of Texas at San Antonio, where she's in her 2nd semester of law school. Grandma Carolyn, do you know what day it is? My birthday, sweetie. Yes, but it's also the day you became my hero, she said in that warm voice that reminded me so much of her dad. I want to be a lawyer like Ms. Garcia. I want to help other grandmothers like you. Sophia had decided to study law after seeing everything we had been through together. Grandma, she had told me last year, you taught me that justice isn't just for the rich. It's for women like us, too. After breakfast, I went to the Mothers with Dignity office. It's a small but welcoming space we rent downtown, with 3 desks, a conference room, and walls filled with photographs of women who have reclaimed their lives after being abused by their own families. Mercedes is still my partner in this adventure. Together, we've helped over 200 elderly women across the country. We have volunteer lawyers in 12 cities, a weekly radio show, and even a book we wrote last year, The Courage to Say No, When Love Becomes Abuse. Today, Mrs. Reyes arrived early. She's a 75-year-old woman whose son had stolen the inheritance her late husband had left her. She came from El Paso, had traveled all night on a bus, and she had that same lost look in her eyes that I had 2 years ago, the look of someone who can't understand how a person you love could betray you so deeply. Mrs. Miller, she said with a trembling voice, I heard your story on the radio. My son took everything from me. He says it's to manage my money, but now I don't even have enough for my medications. I sat down next to her, took her wrinkled hands in mine, and said the same words Mercedes had said to me 2 years ago, Mrs. Reyes, what was done to you is not just morally reprehensible, it's completely illegal. And we are going to help you get back what is yours. I saw her eyes fill with hope, the same hope I had felt when someone finally believed me, when someone told me that my suffering wasn't normal, that it wasn't my fault, that I had the right to fight back. In the afternoon, I went to visit Mrs. Henderson. My old neighbor now lives in a senior living community, a dignified and comfortable place where she's well cared for. When I sold my old house after the trial, I helped her find a place there. Honey, she had told me, after everything you've been through, you deserve to help the one who helped you. Mrs. Henderson, now 72, greeted me in the community garden, surrounded by plants she tends herself. Carolyn, every time I see you, I remember that afternoon when you came back from the courthouse, she said as we shared some cookies she had baked in the communal kitchen. You were crying, but they were different tears. They weren't tears of defeat anymore. It was the first time in months I had cried from joy, I replied. It was the first time I felt like my life belonged to me again. When I got home, I found a letter in my mailbox that surprised me. The return address was Ethan's. My heart skipped a beat, not with hope, but with a mixture of curiosity and caution. I hadn't heard from him since the trial. I knew he'd gotten out of prison after serving 8 months, was working a low-paying job in a small town, and that Jessica had remarried. The letter was short, Mom, I know I have no right to write to you after everything I did. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I understand some things can't be forgiven. I just want you to know that I've had time to think about everything, and I realize you were right, I became someone I don't even recognize. I don't expect a reply. I just wanted to say that I'm glad to know you're okay and that you're helping other women. Ethan. I read the letter 3 times before folding it and putting it in the drawer where I keep my important documents. It wasn't the apology I had dreamed of receiving during the worst moments of my suffering. It was something different, the acknowledgement of someone who had finally understood the magnitude of his betrayal. I didn't write back. Not out of cruelty, but because I had learned that some wounds heal best when you don't keep touching them. Ethan had made his choices, and I had made mine. Our paths had separated forever, and that was okay. That evening, as I ate dinner in my small dining room, lit by a lamp I had chosen myself, I reflected on everything I had learned in these 2 years. I had learned that true love cannot exist without respect. That being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing your dignity. That a family who hurts you doesn't deserve more loyalty than the family you build with people who value you. I had learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to say no, to demand the respect you deserve. That age doesn't make you a less valuable person, and having wrinkles doesn't mean you have to accept mistreatment. But above all, I had learned that the worst betrayal can become the best opportunity to find yourself. My phone rang. It was Javier, my younger son, calling from San Diego. Mom, happy birthday. Sophia told me she's really happy with her studies. She says she wants to be just like Ms. Garcia. Yes, honey. That girl is going to be a great lawyer. Mom, I want to tell you something. I've been thinking a lot about what happened with Ethan, and I'm so ashamed I wasn't there to protect you. Javier, honey, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You didn't know what was happening. But I should have known. I should have checked in on you more. Sweetheart, I said with a smile he couldn't see but could surely hear in my voice, you know what? It turned out I didn't need protecting. I needed to learn how to protect myself. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a while, enjoying the peace of my home. There were no sounds of arguments, no tension in the air, no constant feeling of walking on eggshells. There was only calm. The calm that comes from living in harmony with yourself. I got up and went to the bathroom mirror, the same ritual I've performed every night for these past 2 years. I looked at myself and said, as I do every night, Carolyn, today you were brave. Today you helped someone. Today you lived with dignity. The woman looking back at me was no longer the same one who had signed those papers 3 years ago. She had the same wrinkles, the same gray hair, the same hands weathered by 70 years of life. But there was something different in her eyes, a light that won't go out, a strength that comes from having hit rock bottom and choosing to get back up. Before going to bed, I wrote in my journal, a habit I started after the trial. Today I turned 70. 3 years ago, I thought my life was over when Ethan betrayed me. Today, I understand that my life was just beginning. The worst gift I ever received, that fraudulent mortgage, gave me the opportunity to become the woman I was always meant to be, a woman who respects herself, who helps others, who lives without fear, who says no when she must and yes when she wants. Ethan took many things from me, but without knowing it, he gave me the most valuable thing of all. He gave me back to myself. Now I want to ask you something, you who have listened to my story to the end, have you ever experienced something similar? Or do you know someone who is going through a situation like this? If the answer is yes, let me know in the comments. You are not alone. And if this story touched your heart, if it made you reflect on your own value as a person, please give this a like and subscribe. Your support helps this message reach someone who needs to hear it, someone who is where I was 3 years ago, believing they are worthless, that they don't deserve respect, that they have to put up with anything for the sake of love. Because we all deserve to live with dignity. No matter how old we are.